Alright, now let's go back to the class. So far, I actually feel the circumstances in this class is quite good. And I can see most of you are very, actually, very serious to the class, and you try very hard to understand what I'm talking about. And I actually enjoy teaching you, and I hope you can keep on your attitude to the class. Okay. Now, let's, as I said, we define the elasticity, the price elasticity. Why we call it price elasticity? Because the stimulus is the price, is from the change in price. Thank you. All right, and we'd like to know how the quantity demanded is affected. If you don't understand why this is the percentage change, think about this. So this is the percentage change in P, right? We just changed the sign delta into D. So it's just a tiny change. And now we have an equation here, QD equals 286 minus 20P. And at equilibrium, which is P star equals 3.3 and Q star equals 220. So what about the epsilon? The elasticity epsilon. We may rewrite this into Q differentiate QD with respect to P and PQ. Is that right? It's the same formula. We just rearrange into this form. Okay? And so this would be negative 20. Is that right? And what about the P? The location of P and Q is 3.3 and 220. So 11 negative 0.3. Right? The reason why the price elasticity is negative because the quantity demanded is negatively related to price due to the law of demand. Right? The demand curve is negatively or downward sloping. So it's negative. And the number here, 0.3, we used to define when epsilon, the elasticity, when it is greater than 1, we call it elastic. And if it is less than 1, we call it inelastic or less elastic. Okay? So 1 is the critical value, the division point. So negative sign consists with downward sloping demand and a 1% increase in the price of, now this is the pork. The good is the pork. Leads to a 0.3% decrease because it's negative, so increase, decrease in quantity of pork demand. So this is a numerical example how to compute the elasticity. Yes.
为什么当那个 PQ 那个要换成 P 啊？就是有什么意义？就是有什么意思吗？就是为什么
You mean here? we
就是简报上不是把它变成一个比的上。
oh, B is actually if you make something like this.
哦。
Any other question? All right. So now, if we have a linear demand curve, and for example, as QD equals A minus BP, here you make A and B positive. Okay? And price Q. What would be the vertical intercept? What would it be? The vertical intercept. Which means when Q equals 0, what about P? When Q equals 0, P will be A by B. Is that right? What about the horizontal intercept? It will be A. Is that right? Okay? And what do you think the midpoint, the coordinate of the midpoint? This point will be A by 2 and A by 2B. Is that right? Right? Okay. And what about the elasticity? The elasticity would be Q over P, P and Q. So this term would be negative B multiplied by the equilibrium price. This would be the equilibrium price. It would be this one, right? A over 2B. And the equilibrium quantity at the midpoint would be A over 2. So here we have a unitary elasticity, which means the absolute value of the elasticity is 1. We call it unitary. Unit means 1, unitary. And the elasticity, the absolute value in this region would be greater, the absolute value would be greater than 1. You see, the epsilon is less than negative 1. Don't forget 0, negative 1, and something less than negative 1, whose absolute value would be larger than, greater than 1. Right? Okay, so this part, the absolute value of elasticity will be greater than 1. For example, here is negative 4. So we may take any kind of, say, what if this is A over 4? If this point is A over 4, then what about this point? When Q equals A over 4, then this would be 3/4 and B 3. So 3. 3 over 3a over 4b, right? I say 3, not 所以. I know you misunderstand me. I know that. 3a over 4b here. Alright, so what about epsilon at this point? The elasticity at this point, it will be negative b, same thing. And the price would be 3a over 4b, and the quantity would be a over 4. So in this case, it would be negative 3. And don't mess up, and you don't mess up that, oh, why this point is negative 4 and you've got a negative 3. They are different. Okay? And let me teach you something interesting here. What do you think this term, dq over dp, differentiates q with respect to p? Is it the slope of the linear demand curve? Is this term the slope of this curve or not? Actually, it is the inverse of the slope if we denote slope as m. Because the vertical variable is p and the horizontal variable is q, right? So we differentiate the horizontal with respect to the vertical. It should be 1 over m, 1 over the slope. And what is p over q? P over q means the slope of the connecting curve or connecting line, straight line of the point and the origin. The point and the origin. We may have a linear curve here, right? So the price over q is actually the slope or the tangent value of this theta, the angle theta. So it is the tangent theta. Alright? So you'll see, when we are talking about a point at the midpoint, the slope here will be this divided by this. And tangent theta equals this over this, right? And because this is the midpoint, so this two line segment equals each other. And you divide tangent by this, so it will be 1. Is that clear? The absolute value of the tangent and the slope equals each other, right? And what about this point? The absolute value of the tangent, is greater than the slope, the absolute value of the slope, right? So the bigger one divided by the smaller one will exceed 1. That is why we have 4 here. Is that clear? So let me give you some interesting example So point A and point B, these 2 points share the same slope, but the tangent of point B is larger than the tangent of point A. Is that right? And what do you think if I have D1 and D2? So this is point A. Would you please find a point B on the main curve D2 who shares the same elasticity with point A? How can I do that? Or how can we do that? We just draw a straight line, right? From the origin going through point A, and we may find point B. Because point A, whose tangent value is the same with the tangent value of point B, and they are parallel to each other, so they share the same slope. Okay? So this is another formula you may keep in mind about the elasticity. The tangent value divided by the slope. So if we have a supply curve here and points A and B, which one do you think will have a higher elasticity of supply? They share the same M, right? The same slope on the straight line, on the linear supply curve. But point A has the higher tangent value. So this point will be more elastic than point B. Is that clear? So you may not only can apply the formula to the demand curve, but also supply curve. The same thing. All right. What about this point? What about the elasticity of this point? The slope M is the same. So all points on the curve share the same M. But the tangent value of this point would be 0, is that right? So the elasticity would be 0. Okay? So the absolute value of the elasticity would be 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.6, 7, 8, 9, 1. And 1.1, 1.2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, infinity. Okay? From 0 to infinity. And I'd like to introduce 2 types of sales taxes. Okay, just keep in mind about these 2 types of tax. One, we call it ad valorem tax. Ad valorem tax is in percentage terms. And specific or unit tax is in dollar terms. Okay, so like the California state tax rate is 8.25%. So if you purchase something by $100, you got to pay additional 8.25 in tax. Okay, and in contrast, the specific tax for the gasoline tax is by quantity per gallon. So you pay $0.18 per gallon. So this is by percentage of the price. We call it ad valorem tax. And this is according to the amounts you purchase. For each amount, you will be charged the same. So the first thing, we call it ad valorem. We translate into according to the price, ad valorem. And the second one, the specific or unit tax, we call it according to the quantity. So for simplicity, we always, or in most cases, we follow or we apply the specific tax. But actually, the ad valorem tax is actually not very difficult. So, all right, S1. And now there is a tax levied on the seller. So it's a 1.05 per unit 6 on the seller. Demand, supply, price, quantity. And if you are one of the sellers and you are located here, the height, what does the height mean? The height represents your cost, which means you want to sell your item only when the price goes up than this value, this standard. So this is your willingness to sell. It is a standard because the cost you produce this item is this much. So if you earn less than this cost, you will lose money, right? Your profit will be negative. If you want to make a positive profit, you got to sell only in this range. Okay? Now, the government said, all right, if you are selling something, if you got a deal with some consumer, and if you sell your item, you got to pay an extra tax, which is 1.05. So now you will raise your willingness to sell by 1.05. Is that right? If your cost, the initial cost is say $5, so initially the consumer who are willing to pay you, the consumers who are willing to pay you more than $5, you are very happy to sell your item to them, right? But now you will ask for 6.5 at the least. Otherwise, you will lose money. So the supply curve will shift upward by 1.05. Okay? And without the tax, the original equilibrium is at here. With the tax, the new equilibrium will be here. So this is the original equilibrium price. This is the new equilibrium price. And this price is what the consumer pays. What the consumer pays to you. But you receive only P1 minus 1.05. Is that right? because you got to give 1.05 to the government. So we call it a tax wedge. A tax wedge here. The wedge is actually the triangle. So if you want to keep the door, here, what can we do? We put the wedge under the door, right? So stop the door here by a triangle thing. You know that? So the wedge you may stop the door using a triangle. Put it just under the door. So we call it a tax wedge. So this is the size of the tax. The consumer pays this much and the seller receives this. And so how much the tax revenue the government can receive? This part, right? And you know the consumer surplus, the original one is much bigger. Now, due to the tax, the consumer surplus shrinks, and also the producer surplus shrinks. So some part of the consumer surplus is transferred to the government, and some of the producer surplus transferred to the government. And what does we call this? We call it deadweight loss, right? So it's just disappeared in the air. No one got it. Deadweight loss. We return it to the oh my goods. Do you remember oh my goods? So we call it deadweight loss. We may earn this part, but because of the taxation, we just lose it for the whole society. And okay, we have the same equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, but the demand supply. Which one do you think the demand and supply curves are more elastic? The left one or the right one? The right one is more elastic, right? The sensitivity is more, right? Is higher, because 1 unit change in the price makes the quantity shrink a lot, right? And now with the same size of the tax, we put it here, and we put it here. So they are the same size. And the effect will be different. The more elastic, the higher the deadweight loss. Alright? With the same size of the tax, the more elastic of the demand curve or the supply curve will make the deadweight loss or make the quantity shrinks more.